page we are in line 15, page test. We were talking about explaining why is it that the pasuk says "V'hoya ba'alchem," when you will eat from the lechem ha'aretz, then you will bring a truma l'Hashem. Seemingly, it makes no sense that there is first the eating and then you bring the truma. It's not that way. First you take the truma, meaning first you take off the challah, then you eat. So we started speaking about that there's a difference of lechem and ha'aretz, lechem and hashemayim. Lechem and hashemayim, which is the mon, is primarily something that is done milmayla. Even though there's some aspect of it, some components, even of lechem and hashemayim, that there's avodah milmatla, for example, benching, and there's the idea of collecting the mon and so on, but it's primarily milmayla, as opposed to lechem and ha'aretz, bread from the earth, is something that we have to do the avodah, and the avodah that we have to do with the bread from the earth is indicated by what we said concerning when the Yidden come into Eretz Yisrael. It says, as soon as you come into Eretz Yisrael, v'shafsa arz Shabbos l'Hashem, you shall do Shemitah. What's it mean? You shall do Shemitah. Shemitah is only 7 years later. But the point is that already, when he's coming into Eretz Yisrael, he right away has the correct view of things. He has the correct outlook. He has the correct focus and goal that the purpose that he's working the land is for the different mitzvahs that he's going to do over here in Eretz Yisrael. So even though on the calendar he's not going to do Shemitah till 6 years later, but his focus is right away, I'm going into Eretz Yisrael. Why? To do the idea of Shemitah. That's lechem in ha'aretz, the idea that the bread from the earth is about an avodah of the Yid. It's about what I am doing in this world to elevate and transform this world in my work in the earth. In a similar vein, that I was going to explain about the lechem in ha'aretz also needs challah to be taken before you eat from it. It says in line 15, that's also the idea of mitzvah of chal. That is before the mitzvah of, or before the eating the bread from the earth. So beforehand, we have to initially take off challah as an offering to Hashem, just like initially when he goes into Eretz Yisrael, he has the mind on the avodah of Shemitah and all the mitzvahs at least ba'aretz, even though it may not come till later on. The same thing, this is indicated by the fact the first thing I do before I even eat, which is the avodah of elevation and so on, the first thing I do is I take chal. This idea that before I even eat, I take chal, in other words, I devote something to Hashem. This is similar to the idea of not eating before davening. Like it says, do not eat upon the blood. And the Chazal, one of the explanations that Chazal give in this pasuk of Adam means do not eat while you still did not yet daven for your blood, for your life. What is this idea? That a person cannot eat beforehand. It says in line 19, so that should be able to be the refining that has to take place through eating. How can we attain that level? Because that's the idea of lechem and ha'aretz. We have to work for it, not lechem and hashemayim that comes from the heavens. So it has to be prefaced by the avodah of daven. In a similar vein, the giving of the challah before we eat is like the prefacing of davening before we eat. But pratis yosh, even more specifically, who or whom do we give the challah to? Stillness, challah, ilachilos, hakoyin daf. Who do we give the challah to? We eat it, we give it specifically that the kohen should eat. What's the significance of the kohen? The kohen shluchid rachmananim. The Chazal say kohanim are considered representatives and emissaries of Hashem. By achilas hakoyanim, by miskapim, through the koyanim eating, the Chazal say the owners of the carbon, the ones who are bringing a carbon, they reach their level of kapara. Just like there's a kapara that takes place through the eating of the mizbeach. When we bring a carbon on the mizbeach and the mizbeach's fire consumes the carbon, we know that this brings a kapara for a person, an atonement for a person. In a similar vein, the Chazal used the term that kohanim oichlum b'ayil miskaprim, that the kohanim as well make a kapara for the person when they eat. So this is the concept also. If you remember, we said Adam Rishon was chalasei shaloilo. Since challah is given to the kohen is the level of kapara. Same thing, Adam Rishon, which is the challah of the world, was created from the place of Mizbeach. The Chazal say that the person, that Adam Rishon, his earth, where did Hashem gather his earth from to create it? From the place where the Mizbeach would be built, from the place of the Beis HaMikdash. So in a similar vein, Adam being the challah of the world, like we mentioned before, in a similar vein, our challah is also something that is the kapara. It's given to the kohen. It's a gather of kapara. What does it mean? We don't have a mizbeach now. We don't have a kohen now. So he says that what is its corresponding level these days? Is a person's table. Maimed Azal at Chazal say Shabbat Beis Hamikdash Hayakayim. The times when Beis Hamikdash stood, Mizbeach Mechaper Olav, the Mizbeach atoned for him. The Achshav Shein Beis Hamikdash Kayim. Now that Beis Hamikdash does not exist, a person's table is what atones for him. Why? So it's understood based on this idea that he's taking the challah off of his bread. That challah that he's removing from the dough ensures and makes a level of kapara, just like giving the challah to the kohanim in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, offering the carbon on the mizbeach in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Say them as even more so. Like it's brought down in the Chassidus concerning what levels of elikus are associated with the consumption of the karbonos on the mizbeach versus the levels of elikus that are involved in the consumption that's done by man, meaning by the kohen. We would think, even though the Chazal say kohanim oichlim of bailim miskaprim, that the kohanim eat and that brings a kapara for the ones who are bringing the carbon. Saying it's like, okay, Mizbeach eats, the kohanim eats, and that brings a kapara. But in truth, there's really a hierarchy of levels. What the Mizbeach reaches in the carbon of the person, and what the kohanim reach in the carbon of the person. It says, Shachilos Mizbeach, who top of page Yud, the consumption that Mizbeach have is like, he says, Mashanichum Malach. What occurs by the Mizbeach is that the Malachim are consuming the karbonos. That's the idea that brought down in Zohar, Hazal, that there was a lion, image of a fiery lion that came down that indicated that a lion, the spiritual level of a lion, consumed the karbonos. That was the fiery lion that came down. What is that level? it goes up to the different malachim ad lepnei arya yamin till the highest level of the malachim, till the lion's face that was on the right of the Merkava El Yoina, where this Adam Shalakise sat on, the highest of Merkava in this supernal beast, called different malachim, that their faces were on the Merkava El Yoina, they carried the divine chariot and so on. But we know, sitting upon the Merkava El Yoina, in the image of the Navi, there was a level of called Adam Elyon Sha'alakis, the supernal man that's upon the Kisa. That was not reached through the Achilles Mizbeach. The Achilles Mizbeach went up only to the level of Aryeh Shem Merkava. But Ulamailam is higher than the level of the Achilles Mizbeach is the level that's accomplished Inyan Achilas Adam Adam Elyon Shalakise, when you have the consumption of the Adam above, the divine level of Adam that's sitting upon the throne. They are higher than the beasts of the divine chariot that are lower than Hashem's throne. They are the beasts that carry Hashem's throne, and Adam Elyon Shalakise is upon it. How does that level become evoked, etc.? So he says, when the Koyanim meet, that taps in not just to the level of the Merkava, which is what happens when the Mizbeach consumes it, but rather through the Koyanim eating through that is awakened above the eating of the Adam Elyon. So when the Koyanim eat from the Karbonis, so then they reach and the Allah of the Karbonis is to a much higher level than just what happens with the Karbonis when you put it only on the Mizbeach. So this turns everything around. One would think that something is for the Mizbeach, that's the highest level. The Koyanim also eat. But here, so this turns it around. The Koyanim, they are Achilas Adam down here. It reaches to the Achilas Adam Elyon above. And the Rebbe compares it, just like by the Achilas Adam, by the Karbonis, that reaches the highest, most level. Same thing by Challah v'Zogam in Nisinas HaChallah Achilas HaKoyanim. That's also in the eating of Challah. By the Koyanim consuming, that also goes to the highest, most levels as well. Line 9, second paragraph on page Yud. Amnam inyan haramas hachala koydem achilam, but idea of the raising up of chal that takes place before eating, being similar to davening before eating. This is something that is still within the nefesh halakis itself, not yet engaging in the world. It's prior to eating, prior to engaging in the world, prior to having to do with the nefesh habahamis. That is the preface and introduction to the eating. It ensures when you have, prior to eating, you have the introduction of davening, you have the taking of challah. So that ensures that when you are eating and now when you are engaged in the world, in other words, by dealing with the nefesh halakis before eating, by elevating oneself in the level of nefesh halakis before eating, so now while eating, while being involved in the world, while engaging with things of nefesh habahamis, you're dealing with lechem haaretz, you're dealing with the bread of the earth. you are assuring that it should be even then raised up to Hashem. So you start off first dealing with your nefesh elokis. You have to have the challah before eating. You have to take challah before eating. You have to daven before eating, and then that's all within the world of nefesh elokis. Afterwards, you sit down to eat. You engage with nefesh habahamis. Then it's ba'cholchem alechem haaretz tarim utrum Hashem. You are ensuring, even though it's not the order of when you give the challah, but you are ensuring that now when you eat the lechem haaretz, now even though you're engaged with artius, with world, with nefesh habahamis, even then it will be upraised to Hashem. Not that you are taking challah after you eat. You take the challah before you eat to ensure that when you're eating the bread from the earth, you're elevated. Hainu, he says that it says in line 14, Hainu shalechem haaretz u'nasadam b'sari, the bread of the earth that becomes blood and flesh like his own flesh. It is elevated to the level of the medaber. That's what happens through a yid eating. The first steps is you're taking things that are in the world of daimon, things that are in the world of tzemeach, things that are in the world of chai, and you are ingesting them, and you're making them part of the medaber world, part of the human beings world. And it doesn't stop over there. The purpose is not just it should become part of the medaber, but by days and through that becomes refined and elevated the spark of kedusha that's in the bread. And not only in the bread, there becomes a tarim u'truma l'Hashem. This now affects an ascent in the general earth. The entire earth becomes now elevated. That's why it has to emphasize not Ba'chalchem milachma, but lechem min haaretz. It's trying to tell you that it's a matter of actually elevating the entire earth through it. Until the elevation that occurs through benching, which is the bracha and thanks that follows eating, which is the ultimate elevation. So there's different stages in this elevation. There's the elevation of taking challah before eating. There is the during eating, where we're engaging with the world. There's this impact that it has on the world. Till the ultimate and the conclusion and the apex of this is when we bench after eating. These are all the different stages that we go through in elevation. Any questions before? Is Dalad, top of page Yudal. The Torah is everlasting. Like explained in Tanya. Whether we're talking about fulfillment of the mitzvah of challah in its literal sense, that we always have this obligation of challah. True, we cannot give it to the kohen because we're all in the state of tumah and the kohen can't eat it, so instead we have to burn it. But we do have to separate challah regardless. And also the everlasting nature of it is in the lessons about it. The Heimbe Pirush Reishis Arisisechem Challah Tarimu Gomer Pnimis. Also, then explaining the idea of the first of your dough, you will raise up challah in its inner aspect. What is the meaning? The first of something you are giving to Hashem. Shetzarich leiten laHashem hareishis mikol davar. That the first of everything we need to give to Hashem. V'gam hareishis bezman. Also, the beginning in time. Miyad shekam mishanasi. Immediately when he gets up from sleep. Person shouldn't click on the internet or the radio, the Rebbe used to say, or look in the newspaper to see what's the latest news. No, our first mind, our first focus has to be on that our Binyamin used to say, to place my davening right next to my bed, not to have other distractions, other occupations. This is also similar to what we said before about making sure not to eat before davening. The main thing is that the best of my time, when I'm freshest and when I'm all opened, that's when I should devote to Hashem. The Rebbe used to also emphasize this concerning schools. And there were certain schools that, for whatever reason, first of all, there was the idea of afternoon Talmud Torahs. So they used to send the kids to public school, and then in the afternoon they used to study Torah. Then there was Jewish day schools that, for whatever reason, sometimes they used to set up the system where they had secular studies in the morning and the Torah studies in the afternoon. And the Rebbe was used to challenge this approach and said the child has to know that when his mind is freshest, that is when you study Torah, etc., not as like an afterthought after I've taken care of everything else. I've gone to public school, or after I've done my secular schools in Hebrew day school, I have secular study in Hebrew day school, then I've got extra time in the afternoon, like it's like, an afterthought. He has to know, and he has to have the psychology behind it as well, that this is the first thing of my day. And the Rebbe goes on to say, through this we effect to place a bracha to your house. We asked initially in the Maimer, why does it say laniach bracha el beisecha? Why doesn't it say the litein lecha bracha, etc., which is the more common terminology? Why does he emphasize the idea of beisecha? So beisecha is we spoke earlier in the Maimer, is the idea of the world is called the home, because it says Chachma Yivnei Bayis, that we have to bring the bracha and the elevation into the world. And the Rebbe says there's the practical Beisecha and the broader sense of Beisecha. So he says when a person makes sure to give their first and their best in time and in everything else, in their bread, the first they give away to Hashem. So then they bring a bracha, hein b'bayis haprati shayach elav, both in their individual's home, their literal home, their simple home that's connected with them. Hein b'bayis haklali d'chlal so'ilam. Then we also ensure also in the general home of the world in general. All of them are concerning the world in general. It says Bereshis bara Elokim, that the world was created with Bereshis. Shenivra bebeis, it was created with the letter Beis. The first letter of the Torah, the first letter of creation was the letter Beis, which means that the letter Beis was responsible for the creation of the world. And what is the letter Beis of Rosh Hashanah for? Rosh Hashanah Bayis. First of all, the letter Beis is the first letter of the word Bayis. V'gam Rosh Hashanah Bracha. Also the beginning of the word bracha, which means already at the beginning of creation, the world was set up in such a way where it was like a home and something that housed in it bracha. But we said before that even though there was a bracha in the home of the world, at the beginning of creation, Bereshis, right away at first, but through the descent, we got to a higher level. Sheches by Brocha, Nilus, Yosim, that now, through the level of Chal, both the literal physical Chal, and also the idea of giving the first of my time to Hashem, I am bringing down a bracha that's greater than it was at the beginning of creation. Okay, Niskar was mentioned previously, through repairing what was ruined through the sin of Eitz Hadas. It becomes a greater ascent than it was before the sin of the Eitz Hadas. Until we come to the ascent and elevation of Mashiach's times, Eila told us Peretz that in the words that it says concerning Yehuda's child that he had with Tamar, the twins. So there was it goes through these are the offspring, the history of Peretz. Peretz we know is the forefather of David. In other words, he is the forerunner of Mashiach. So Eila told us Peretz indicates the revelation that will be when Mashiach comes. That's why he's saying Ashaboim Liuli the loss of love. And Toldos Moli, the word Toldos that says by Peretz is spelled full. It's spelled out with a vav in the Sefer Torah, even though often it doesn't spell with a vav. The truth is that by the creation of the heavens and the earth, it also says Eila Todos Hashemayim Va'aretz Bihibaram. And what do we learn from that? Chazal learns from that the world was created complete and perfect. Nothing was missing in the world. So still in all, even though the world was complete at the beginning of creation, but as we have said before, every descent is for the sake of a higher ascent. Mashiach will come after the different descents and the Golosn and so on. So Eila told us Peretz, the Toldos Mole, the fact that Toldos by Peretz is written with a Oizvav, as opposed to the Toldos of El Toldos Shemaim Vars Bottom, it's written with a Oizvav, it's of a much higher caliber. The same thing, just like by Chala, by the mitzvah of Chala, the Reishis Seichem, that you get a bracha into your home and a bracha into the world, which is the home, is a much greater bracha because it followed the descent of the Chetz Hadas than the Bereishis Bara Lakim, the bias and bracha that was at the beginning of the creation. This fullness and perfection and completion will be the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu speedily mamish. Then it will be much good in the material and spiritual, like we said, that it brings bracha into your house. This Chala mitzvah brings bracha, material blessings. Before Baram, like to explain the Rambam, that all delightful and enjoyable things will be as available as dust. They will comprehend the mind of their maker, the creator, as much as possible for a human being to be able to comprehend. The Messiah, until the way it concludes, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, like the waters covers the sea. This is all a result of our chala, both in the physical, material chala, and also in the spiritual sense of giving the first of our time away to Hashem. This all will bring that about.